All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hi. Thanks for joining us tonight. Good evening. As you come in, click like, share, let others know that we are live and that we're about to start our tonight's discussion on Say It Loud with Eve. Hi. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. Welcome. Good evening. Good evening to all our viewers, and welcome to another nice discussion on Say It Loud with Eve. Hope your week has been going well so far, and if it's not, please try and make the best of what's left of it. Okay? I'd like to shout out to all the students who have returned to school, especially those who started university. I want to say congratulations to you, and we are hoping all the best with your studies for the future. Remember to keep safe. Okay. Tonight we're focusing on and we'll be discussing what is a very delicate, very sensitive and emotional topic. It's that is the loss of a baby. Now, we all experience loss in one way or the other at some point in our lives. And the way we deal with losses, we deal with them differently. Right? Losing a baby takes it to another level, and no parent or child is ever prepared for the loss of a child at any age. It's very profound. So tonight we're going to be hearing a true story from a mother who's experienced this firsthand. All right. With that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce the panelists tonight. Getting a little bit of feedback. I'm getting some feedback, guys. I'm not sure why. If I'm live, please mute your phones, or I'm getting a lot of feedback. Right, so tonight we'll hear the true story of a mother who's experienced this loss firsthand. On panel tonight, we have Rachel Morris Peart, who is mother to an 11-year-old son. She's a wife, a school teacher by profession. She's an author and recently turned wellness coach. She's a Black Lives Matter representative, and she sits on a panel at an academy as an equality and diversity representative. She serves also as an area coordinator for a charity called Operation Christmas Child, and is a children's church coordinator at her local church in Northampton. He's also a proud owner of Shell's Pampering Gifts, which is a small business that sells and baskets and Christian greeting cards and so on for you. Also tonight we have Jen Coates. Jen is Director of Bereavement Support and Volunteering at SANS. And SANS is the acronym for Stillbirth and Neonatal Death Charity. Joining us again is Dr. Alicia Anderson, a counseling psychologist. Now, I would like to say welcome to all of you and thanks for joining me tonight. And I'm looking forward to this informative discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna jump into it. Rochelle, tonight we're looking forward to hear your story. And I just want to start by asking, how are you?
I'm doing well, Eve. Thank you. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good, great. Thanks for joining us. Now, you have gone through this
Thank you very much.
Experience, and what is the one question, whether now or earlier back then, what is the one question you wish people would not ask you about this?
Well, the one question I loathed being asked at the time was, when are you going to have another one? I think psychologically, people immediately think once you've lost a child, you should just get back into it, strike while the iron's hot. And I think it's, like you said, it's such a sensitive issue. and it's so personal. Not everyone is prepared mentally, physically, emotionally. We're not geared up to like jump back in and prepare for another child. You know, we need to grieve. We need to acknowledge what has gone on before we move forward, basically.
And on the back of that, what is the one question you wish somebody would ask you then and even now?
I think it's just how are you doing and how are you doing it? Like, you know, how are you doing? I
Yeah.
think, you know, it's really overrated sometimes, that simple question. And what I found out was the fact that um, people, you tend to, and I think I'll probably comment on this later on in the interview, you find out who people are in this process, like who's got your back and who's there for you. Some people shy because they don't know what to say or what to do or what to, you know, if they're going to say the wrong thing. So, you know, it's literally how are you doing, you know, in this process? How are you coping?
Yeah. Okay. How long has it been since the loss?
Well, it's been 4 years now, just over 4 years.
Wow. Okay. I thought that some reason I thought it was like two. I don't know where I got that. Wow.
No, it's quite strange because at the time when I was pregnant, I was one of three. So I had two other friends that were pregnant at the same time. And we did this little thing where we like, oh, I've got something to tell you. And then we showed like the whole scan picture. And then it's like, snap, I'm pregnant, you're pregnant. So we all had this idea, yeah, we'll be on mat leave together. Yeah, you know, our children were growing up together. So, you know, yes, it's 4 years. And yeah, my friends now, they've got their children. And when I look at their boys, I look at them and think, you know, that would have been my little one at the same age growing up at this time. So it's a bit like I reminisce at that point.
Yeah. Walk us through your journey a little bit, Rochelle, just to give us an understanding of, you know, what it's been like. Walk us through how far along were you when you found out something was wrong with the pregnancy? At what stage it happened? Just tell us your story. What happened?
Okay. So my pregnancy was very normal. Up until a point where maybe a few weeks before I lost the baby, I went into hospital for a routine checkup, and I think we had to do the glucose test. But I think the ward was running a little bit late at the time, and my kind of levels, my sugar levels, and everything had dropped. Didn't know that's that was the case at the time. So basically, my body went into kind of like a epileptic shock type of thing. You know, I was just out of it. Like I went out of it, and I was like that for not a whole day, but I came around. It was in the morning, and then I came around in the evening, and you know, the doctors were like, "Oh, you know, what happened?" And I'm like, "I'm looking to you to tell me what's happened." So then they had me on a bit of a like a diabetes watch to see if it was something that I was diabetic, if I had diabetes in pregnancy. That study hadn't been complete before I lost the baby. So everything was normal up to then, and then basically I was 31 weeks plus, so I was about 7 months pregnant. Looking to go off on maternity leave at the time. I was teaching at a school in Edmonton. We had planned to go on a school trip to Westbo, so it was the Anglo-Saxon village, and did all the assessment. Everything was fine. The day before, I went in the shower. My feet were just a bit swollen. I'm like, oh, I feel a bit tired. I'm going to go to bed a bit early tonight because it's going to be like a longer day ahead. You know, had my pillow and cushion in the front seat of the minibus and everything. So everything was pretty normal that day, you know. To the location in Westo, and I felt a bit like, oh, I feel a bit winded, like, you know, I just need to, I don't know, pass some wind or something.
Yeah.
And then normally I earlier on in my pregnancy, I'd kind of seen a pattern where I knew that once I'd eaten, my baby would normally like kind of respond, jump around, you know, play around, and I know, okay, you're filled, you're satisfied. It's time for me to go sleep now on the school couch at lunchtime. So I had a cup of like hot drink, and then had my packed lunch and everything, and I wasn't doing much on that day because we had already had like an extra body there. I was just there for kind of like support. You know, the risk assessment said I could sit down, you know, if I needed to, and that's what I did. So eating lunch, sat down and went, and the kids kind of like went on ahead with the other adults to kind of explore the village and everything. And after I'd eaten, I thought, that's weird. I haven't felt the baby move, because normally he would move like, you know, after I'd eaten, whatever. So I said, okay, that's a little bit strange. Cool, okay. Before we left the village, I went to the toilet and like, you know, wiped, and then I saw like this kind of like pinkish discharge, and I thought, okay, okay. I think by then I was in a little bit of pain, like unusual pain, nothing like strenuous, nothing intense or anything. So I said to myself, okay, I'm keeping an eye, see what's going on. Back on the minibus, going back home to London. You know, I felt like, oh, feels like a little bit of blood, you know. So I was like, okay. I said to the driver, going back home, I wouldn't sit in the front. I'd just sit at the back, just for a little bit more comfort and everything like that. As we started the journey, started to feel more pain, seeing this bleeding, like spotting, developing into bleeding. So I signaled to my T, and I said, you know, something's not right, whatever, you know, can we call the hospital? Yeah. Call the hospital, North Mid, which I was under at the time, and they said, oh, basically, come to us as soon as you can. Called back later on in the process and said, you know, this is going on. So they said, the best thing you're going to have to do is pull to the side of the road and call the emergency service, and they'll pick you up close to where you are, basically. Do you want me to continue?
Okay. So you got to hospital.
Yeah.
And what happened?
No. Yeah, I wasn't at the hospital at the time. I was still on the minibus. Yeah. Bleeding started to come a little bit more intense, a little bit more pain. So I started to think, why am I in this pain? Am I going into labor? What's happening? You know, because it just felt really strange. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm bleeding. So the kind of like a car ambulance came, and they saw to me what they had to do. There was 2 minibuses, so they had to move the children off the minibus, because this was all going on while the kids was on there. Okay. Move the kids to the bus, so that I could be attended to. So the roadside ambulance came, and you know, they were talking me through, asking me about my pain levels, what I'm experiencing, about things. So they were kind of just there to intercept until the main ambulance came. Main ambulance came, which felt like forever. Like, it just felt like hours and hours. And I'm thinking, is the hospital that far away? You know, came, and again, it took a very long time to kind of like even get me on the ambulance. And even when they did, I think I walked off the minibus, walked into the ambulance. You know, they do their own routine tests and things like that. At this time, I'm thinking, you know, why are they not checking anything? Why are they not, like, you know, attending to me, looking at what's the underlying issue, what's going on, you know? And further on in the process, I learned that, you know, an ambulance, for example, is not equipped to tests, like, you know, a baby's heart monitor. Don't have that kind of facility.
What
So
stage,
it was
Rochelle?
literally like a transport to the hospital.
At what stage?
Sorry?
At what stage did you realize that you were losing the baby?
I think it must have been while being in the ambulance. I was in intense pain. I was going along, and again, the ride to the hospital just seemed to take forever. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm bleeding. I haven't heard baby move for some hours now. You know, you're hopeful, or I'm hopeful, but I'm riding along in the ambulance, kind of like in real intense pain, just kind of in and out. You know, got to the hospital. Don't even. I think my eyes was closed at this point because the pain was intense. The pain was real. Got in there, and I think what had happened was my blood pressure was really high, so it was soaring at this time as well. Again, it felt like ages until they did strap me onto a machine to check the baby's heart rate and everything like that. And I think at the time they were saying, like, you know, they were worried and concerned about even myself, and the level of the high blood pressure that I had been experiencing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you realize then that maybe there's a possibility you were losing the baby, or?
I think the reality, it was starting to dawn on me.
Yeah.
When, you know, finally, eventually, the doctor said, you know,
Yeah.
they can't hear me. And that's the thing that, you know, you're like, okay, what does that mean, type of thing, you know? And at that point, reality had kicked in, like, you know, I'd lost the baby. I'm in no man's land. I'm in West Sussex. I've got no family with me. My phone battery's died. My teaching assistant wanted to come with me to the hospital, but she had to look after the kids and go back with the kids.
Yeah.
So there was nobody but me in that hospital at this time receiving this news. No mother, no husband, nobody. Like, nobody knew where I was. As in, they didn't know because, like, the messages would have been passed on by my workplace then to my family. But at that point, it was just me and God on that hospital bed, with that news that, you know, yes, I'm not going home with a baby.
Yeah. And can you describe, if you can, if you're comfortable doing so, can you describe the emotions, the thoughts that you know that kind of hovered over you at that time? What were you feeling?
Intense sadness, definitely, like grief. There's all sorts going on. There's like, what have you done? What did I do? What did I not do? Why wasn't this figured out earlier? What, were there any signs to say that this was going to happen, etc., etc. But eventually, even while still being there, I still felt like I had, because even though I knew I'd lost the baby was still inside of me, and that was another process. Like, I didn't know that I would still have to deliver this child. Do you understand? So it's like, I'm going to deliver a lifeless baby. That doesn't make sense. And you had to go through the normal processes as if you were going to deliver a live baby, a baby that you're going to take home. That part of it really did kind of like made me think like it was just really, really hard. I'm going around on a maternity ward, hearing babies crying through the night, hearing this, hearing that, knowing that I'm and it just felt strange. My stomach was still big. Baby hadn't been delivered, but I knew that when the baby did come out, I wasn't going to be taking the baby home. So it was just a little bit of like shock and disbelief and all sorts of emotion running through at the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you. Alicia, how you heard her describe the thoughts and the emotions, shock, disbelief kind of. Can you, how important is it for somebody to go through these emotions and, like she's described, is it normal? Can you just kind of briefly touch on the stages of grieving or, that initial shock that somebody might go through after experiencing this kind of thing?
Absolutely. I think for each individual, we go through what it seems like a traumatic situation for Rochelle in different ways. We deal with trauma in different ways. I mean, losing someone is grief, but I think from losing a child, it's sometimes mostly traumatic for people who lose children, especially describing what Rochelle said that she went through, having to go through everything without any family around her or any support. That must have been really scary, and that would have made the situation even worse for her. So that would have been difficult to deal with. And you can imagine how difficult it's going to be for her to even accept what is going on, which is the ultimate, to accept that, if you're losing a baby and there's nothing you can do about it. And any emotion that comes as a result is how Rochelle, whatever comes up for her, there is no specific emotion that we can go through as individual. It could be shock, it could be extreme sort of anger. It varies. But I think the most common stages of grief that we know and that we sort of deal with every day is that model that was set out by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she stated that there are 5 stages of grief, and this starts with, say, denial. And denial is almost the brain way of sort of defending and sort of not accepting what's going on. The reality of losing someone is very, very painful, and it's our brain way of just defending against that. Then the next stage is anger, and that's where we can be from mild sort of frustration to sort of being really outraged and sort of raging sort of emotions. We can then move on to the next one, which is bargaining. And sometimes what happens, we're bargaining with ourselves sometimes. Oh, we're not going to do this. This is how we're going to do things differently. Or next time, this is how I'm going to deal with it. Or we can sometimes bargain with a higher being like God. We can say, God, next time if you do this, this is how we're going to behave. This is how we're going to deal with the situation. And then the next stage is depression. Not depression in the same pathology that we know of people who are outside of sort of experiencing death or grief. It's a complete different thing. It's a normal reaction, and you do not pathologize someone who is actually grieving. Then the final stage would be acceptance, and this is ultimate. And although these are the 5 stages that were listed, it doesn't mean that as individuals we're all going to go through them the same way. Some people can be stuck in denial for a very long time or for their entire life. Or some people can be stuck in anger, or some people can go through all of the stages. It depends. And you can also move on to, say, for example, acceptance, and then revert back to an earlier stage. It just depends on the individual and how we deal with the situation. And I wouldn't say there's a normal way, but however we react to it, it's our own way. And we just have to accept and go with that and deal with it as it comes.
Rochelle, hearing all of that, where would you say you're at this stage?
I would say I'm healed. I thank God for that. I've always said, and I realized very early on that if it wasn't for prayers that were going up, and if it wasn't for my faith, I know certainly I would be somewhere in a cemetery, just like either being there, a dead being, or being one of those people that have to go there regularly, every day or every week or every month, not accepting. I've accepted that, my baby was too precious for this earth. God wanted him for a better job, a bigger job. And, his friends up there in heaven, and God is just making good use of him. So I'm healed from that. And I thank God. It's only by the grace of God and my faith in God that has kept me. I remember very early. So say I delivered Hezekiah, because I named him. I delivered him the Saturday night. Then the Sunday morning, I had asked for chapel personnel to come up and have like a little service with me. So we had a little service, and you know, I was listening to music, like, you know, inspiring gospel music at the time while I was laying in the hospital. And the service we had, I asked for a particular song. And then, you know, like even the nurses, like they were crying. One of them had to go out. They're like, you know what? It's so inspirational that, like, you know, having just gone through something like this, you're just kind of like basically worshiping God. Like, how can I do that? I know not. But I know it's the prayers. I know particularly at the time, I was part of this prayer group, and I still am. And I think I sent out a SOS message like before my battery died. Pray for me. Something's going on. Don't quite recall the words I said. I know that it's the prayers that kept me and is keeping me up to this day.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask Jen. Thanks for joining us again, Jen. Now, SANS, the acronym SANS stands for Stillbirth and Neonatal Death Charity. And it's a national charity in the UK that provides support to anyone affected by the death of a baby. Now, Jen is Director of Bereavement Support and Volunteering at SANS. Jen, can you tell us a little more about the charity? How long has SANS been around, where you're based, and how you operate?
So, I mean, I wanted to say thank you to Rochelle for sharing her story as well, because I think it's only through sharing stories and people being really open about their experiences that we can raise awareness and hopefully eventually reduce the numbers of babies dying. But SANS has been around for 42 years now. It was set up by two bereaved mothers in 1978 who had both lost children. And in those days, there were no bereavement suites, you know, the special rooms where parents can deliver their baby and spend time with their baby away from a maternity ward. Often parents weren't even allowed to see their babies, and sometimes partners weren't in the delivery room anyway, so nobody would have met the baby. So there was a general lack of acknowledgement and advice to go away and try again, which is something that obviously Rochelle touched on when she was talking about the questions that she least wanted to hear. So one of the bereaved mums was Belmooney, and she happened to be a journalist, and she wrote an open letter in a newspaper, not knowing, she sort of reached out into the dark really, not knowing who would respond to this, talking about how she'd lost her son. And Hazel Ann Lewis, who was a psychiatric social worker, had also experienced the loss of a baby, and she responded, and it snowballed basically from there. Women writing and saying they never met their babies, they had no idea where they'd been buried, or they hadn't felt as if they had permission even to name their baby sometimes. And it gradually grew from there, with volunteers starting to answer the phone and support groups growing up around the country. And now we have a small sort of core staff team, and we have about 100 support groups around the country, around the UK, in Northern Ireland and Scotland and Wales, as well as in England. And we support people internationally as well if they make contact with our bereavement support team. So yeah, we provide support. We also work really hard to train healthcare professionals so that midwives and nurses have the skills and the confidence really to have those brave conversations and give parents the space to start to create memories with their baby, to have the confidence to deliver their baby. Rochelle talked about, you know, that feeling that she had no idea that she was going to have to deliver, or how she was going to be able to deliver her baby, knowing that her son had already died. And that's something we hear a lot. So being able to, to enable professionals to have the confidence to support parents through that is so important. So we provide a lot of training. And we also work with policymakers and the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Royal College of Midwives, to raise awareness, and with the government as well, to raise awareness of the numbers of babies dying. There are still 14 babies that die every day through stillbirth or neonatal death, and that's a number that people find really surprising, and it's shocking. You know, if the same number of toddlers were dying every day, there would be a national outcry, but because there is this taboo and a certain amount of isolation, obviously, around losing a baby that maybe family haven't met, it makes it much harder to raise that awareness and for parents to feel comfortable to talk about it. So we do a lot of work to try and reduce the numbers of babies dying by raising awareness of the issues and changing clinical practice.
Yes, thank you. At what stage does an organization like SANS get involved? Tell us, is there a referral process to SANS, and how do bereaved parents, babies contact you? How do they get in contact?
We're very open, so we want as many people to contact us as need us, basically, and that can be at any stage. So obviously, somebody might find out at the 20-week scan that there is something wrong with their baby. So we also support parents who've had to make the really difficult decision to end a pregnancy for medical reasons, either for the baby or for the mother. And people can contact us at any stage during pregnancy. So whilst we are the Stillbirth and Neonatal Death charity, if people find our support helpful, then obviously we won't turn them away. So we do have people who've experienced earlier losses, miscarriage, late miscarriage, stillbirth, as well as stillbirth, contacting us. And they can literally just pick up the phone. We have web chat. We have a bereavement support app that can be downloaded. Lots of information on our website. So there are lots of different ways that people can get in touch. And the other really important area, I think, is subsequent pregnancy. If somebody chooses to go on and have a subsequent pregnancy and is able to have a subsequent pregnancy, it's such an anxious time, getting to the point where you maybe got to in the previous pregnancy, the fact that your innocence has gone, really, that this can happen. So it's happened once, so it could happen again. The anxiety during subsequent pregnancy is massive. So we do support a lot of women and families going through a subsequent pregnancy as well.
Wow. And if you just give us a brief picture of the process now. So someone like Rochelle, for example, say she's referred to you or she accesses your services. Can you kind of talk us through the process? How do you help her to navigate through this ordeal?
I think in lots of different ways.
The first point of contact with her.
So, I don't know how Rochelle found us, but I'm really glad that she did. We provide memory boxes that we send to hospitals so that parents can start to create memories with their baby in the hospital. So if they feel that it's appropriate and they want to, they can make hand and footprints of their baby. We have 2 little teddies in our memory box, so one can stay with the baby and the parents can keep the other teddy. So parents sometimes find us because they've been given a memory box by a healthcare professional. They sometimes look us up on the internet and then pick up the phone and ring our helpline. Or they may just text us or message us on our Facebook. We have a closed Facebook page. So that support starts as soon as somebody has contact, basically. And we try to respond in the way that the parent has contacted us. So if they want to be supported by Messenger or on Facebook, that's how we provide the support. If they want to pick up the phone, then we can have conversations as many times as people need them.
Okay. I know you. Okay, you wanted to say something else, Jen?
Oh no, I was just going to say, obviously, if we have local groups around the country, and sometimes parents don't find us until they're back at home and in the community. So they might make contact through a local support group and find us that way and meet up with other bereaved parents, which I know is incredibly helpful. And we have an army of trained volunteer befrienders out there who have gone through the experience themselves and have had training and support to be able to hold the space, I guess, for bereaved parents and give them that time once they're back home for many years often.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I know you have a memory box there with you, but later on, I'll just ask you to kind of expose and show some of the content of what's in there, all right? Rochelle, how do you kind of integrate this loss of your baby into everyday life? I know there's another question in terms of family, I'll ask you later on, but how do you kind of integrate this into everyday life?
It is there and it's not there in a sense. As was just mentioned just before, I was offered one of those boxes in the hospital, and I think that's how I kind of got in touch with Sands. And I'm very much a memorabilia type of person. I like keepsakes, and I think that was really, really nice, really lovely. At the time, the nurses offered, they took photos of my baby, which was put in my box, and the box with the little teddies. Yes, we had a burial, and one of the teddies went with him. One's in the memory box, and then it had a couple little butterflies as well. So little memorabilia like that keeps his memory alive. For example, I talk with my son. If it comes up, like, because he's always kind of talking, you know, very vividly, very openly about his brother that he never got to meet. So we'll talk about him, but I wouldn't say it's on a daily basis. Yeah. I've got a photo which I treasure, and that's up in the house, you know, just there. Like, it's not something I go up to every day and say, you know, or, and what we've done as well, we've celebrated birthdays. So we'll visit the grave and put fresh flowers and balloons and stuff on the anniversary of his birth.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned your son, because, you know, having another child or children in the mix, it makes it more difficult sometimes. You knew this before everyone else in your family, obviously. Now, when you had to break that news to your 11-year-old son, what was it like, you know, to tell your son that, look, your brother isn't coming home? What was his response to this? How did he react?
It was one of the hardest things in the process. My husband and I sat him down, because obviously all he knew that mommy was gone for a few days. He hadn't quite known, nobody had spoken to him about what happened. Coming back home, you know, no baby, and then, you know, there needs to be an explanation. And he cried, he wept. And that wasn't just a one-off experience, that would happen over and over again. And I remember one night we were coming in, and I think we were coming in from prayer meeting or something like that. And like, this young boy at the time, this child, he just like was inconsolable. I had him and I had to grab him. And I'm like, God, what do I do? So then I called my prayer leader, and I said, oh, this is what's happening. And he's crying, and I don't know what to, because it's like, you need to comfort yourself and you're having to comfort. And he's like, oh, mommy, it's not fair. I didn't get to see him. At least you and daddy got to see him. And, you know, and this would play over and over again, even to the effect where it would affect his school life, in terms of he'd talk about it at school, and, you know. So he went through a process where he went through art therapy, and that kind of helped him with his grieving process as well, because it was very kind of like he could talk about things. And since then, he's really, really developed a love for art. I mean, he's 11 now, and he doesn't go into a state like that. But ever so often, you would hear him say, like, you know, so-and-so is, you know, it's not fair they get to have a baby brother or a baby sister. And, you know, my baby brother's died, or, you know, things like that. Just open, honest conversation that a child would have. So then we'll have to have a talk about it, you know, and we have our moments. We have our moments, you know, but we get through them.
And generally, how did this, or how has this impacted on family life in general?
I think it's had an effect. For example, I remember coming home from the hospital, my friend, it sounded like I had nobody. I had nobody at the hospital to start with. It took time for my husband to finally join me. Obviously, he needed to receive the news and come from London. I can't even remember the journey. I think it's probably like over 2 hours or something drive to West Sussex. So then I remember going home in the car. My husband had joined me. My friend had come as well to kind of like take me home. And then I was so angry at my husband. I was like, he was trying to tell me something, and I think we were trying to arrange the burial at the same time. And obviously it's still fresh and it's still new. And I remember screaming at him like something like, I don't even know what you're doing, or how can you tell me that? You know, like, just really, really, I was just really angry.
Mm.
And it had kind of, there, anything like this would have affect a family life, husband and wife and the family. And furthermore, you get to a point in the process where, husband's asking, like, another child, and you're like, no, I'm not ready, type of thing. And it's hard for them, for the men to understand. I think they hurt too, definitely, and they lose and they grieve, but they're kind of more like towards the side of everybody else who says, like, we can have another one and we can move on, where you're probably not ready and they're ready, and then it's like, we're on different levels at the moment, and then that can kind of cause a bit of a dispute, friction, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. Jen, obviously we hear, and Alicia, we hear Rochelle with making reference to her faith that has carried her through this process. Jen, do you get this a lot from parents? Do you find that it's a place of solace, that faith? A lot of parents who are bereft use their faith as this place of solace to get them through the ordeal. Do you get this a lot?
I think where a family has a faith, yes, it can be, but I think equally with bereavement, sometimes it can make people question their faith as well. I think it varies. Bereavement and grief doesn't happen in a vacuum. It sort of lands in a situation, and people respond very differently. So I think if people do have a faith and it does sustain them, then that's really helpful. And equally, if they don't, there will be other things which sustain them, and they find that really helps as well. So I think, yeah, it varies from family to family.
Mm.
But certainly sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about what Rochelle said about her husband, and certainly partners do and can grieve really differently, and that can be really hard. Sometimes one partner is wanting to focus on the grief and the baby, and the other partner is not at that time. And then you move between those states of engaging with the grief and not engaging with the grief. And if it doesn't happen at the same time, that can be really challenging. And we do have a lot of contact with the bereavement support team of people who are just feeling very disconnected from their partner because they're grieving in a different way at a different time. And that's really normal, really normal.
Do you provide support? I mean, we talk about the parent, and when we say parent, I think we kind of zero in a lot on mom, a whole lot on mom. Do we provide the support beyond that? Because then we talk about the siblings, which I believe get forgotten sometimes, by, and in terms of support, and also grandparents, or, the immediate family, so to speak. Do you provide any kind of support for that?
Absolutely. So our bereavement support team support grandparents, wider family, anybody who contacts us. So our the line that we put under everything is anyone affected by the death of a baby. So it could be a best friend, it could be a partner, grandparent, sibling, it could be someone long ago bereaved. So yes, we absolutely provide support to anybody who contacts us. We're developing our sibling support all the time. We've got some lovely children's books on our website, storybooks for young children, because often the siblings are young, just to help them explore the fact that their sibling has died, and we're developing those all the time. And I think one of the areas that I'd really like to look at is, because there are so many more blended families now, there are stepchildren involved who may have had quite ambivalent feelings about another baby coming in the family and not knowing where they sit within the family. And that's very normal for biological siblings. But if you imagine blended families, there are more step siblings, and that relationship is complex already. So we definitely need to start developing more resources for step siblings. We have a bereavement support book that goes out to hospitals, as well as the memory boxes, and that covers support for children at different ages and the kind of understanding that they will develop at different ages. And Alicia will understand, the different, well, as will Rochelle, being a teacher, there's different levels of understanding that children go through, and developmental stages changes their perception of death and dying and how permanent it is. And that increasing understanding, often children will revisit a bereavement as they move through those developmental stages. And it's just really helpful, I think, for parents to understand that, so they don't panic and think, oh goodness, what's going on? Why is this suddenly come up again, what do I do? You know, to be prepared that this might happen, and the questions change, the understanding changes, but just to be able to allow a child, as Rochelle has described, just to behave in the way they want to behave and to be upset and to explore it with them gently is perfect. You know, it will enable them to feel safe and to feel that grieving is normal, and you can move in and out of grief, and that is safe as well. So yeah, lots to think about.
Thank you. Thank you. Alicia, can you add some more in terms of why is it important for to grieve? It's important. Why is it so? Why is it important that at regardless of the stage that you go through, regardless for however long you may ebb and flow or go through it, back and forth. Why is it important? Is it important to grieve, and why?
It's absolutely very important. It's vital that we do grieve. It's about processing what has happened, what it means for us as individuals, and how are we going to move forward with having lost the person that we have. What does it mean? Especially like for a child that you were looking forward to, you probably had hopes and dreams for them. Were they going to be a tennis player, football player? All these things that you sort of sometimes planned out, for your child, and all these fantasies that you have. And if you don't process and have that moment to grieve, you will never actually get to the next stage of accepting that they're not going to be there. And some of the hopes and dreams you have for them are not going to be realized. So it's definitely, you need to process that so you can move on. And when we say move on, it's not to move on from the person who is lost, like you're not going to remember them or they're not going to be sort of part of your life. Like Rochelle said, it's very important. She's created like almost like a ritual to, for the family to grieve and to, sort of see the photo of the baby and to take acknowledgement that, he's part of our life, he's not here. And I think that's a very good thing because she's going through the process. She's taking time, like she said, not necessarily on a daily basis. Sometimes it can be if it comes up, but there's that ritual. So it becomes embedded in the family life, and then it makes it sort of acceptance. Because when we don't pay attention and we don't grieve, there is always something there, and it can have an underlying sort of influence on our behavior, how we feel. And then we're thinking, what's going on with us? And we don't know. But sometimes it's on these unresolved issues that we don't process that can influence us in a negative way. So this is why it's really important to process and to grieve.
Thank you. And Rochelle, I know you mentioned you are very involved. You're a coordinator of a children's church, and so you went off to hospital, and everything happened, and then you obviously reintegrated back into social life. Church is a big part of your life, obviously, and you're very involved. Now, on going back to church, did you see this as, maybe it will be very cathartic for me to go back, to be around people rather than being just alone with family or just alone with, did you see this as maybe if I go back, my spirit can get uplifted, I'll be encouraged? And what was it like for you having to go back to see your friends who's given birth? What was it like?
Well, church has been at that point, and even now, it's been an embedded part of my life. So it's like the Bible says, what can take me away from your presence? Anything, nothing, can separate me from the love of God. So I did take some time out, not a very long time. I took maybe a few weeks, a month. And what I had done initially, my friend invited me to just come and kind of stay with her over the weekend. I think that was leading up to Easter by this point. So that was very good to, being offered that kind of support, just some space away out of London. To breathe. I didn't go back to my church straight away. I remember I attended like a sister church, same kind of like denomination, same but a different branch. And what I felt there, I felt like nobody knew me, or maybe one or two, but they wouldn't know me. They don't know my story. They wouldn't have known what I've been through. So one, I wouldn't be getting the questions. I wouldn't be, getting that kind of like what you need, the support and the going through the whole thing publicly. So I did that, and then I went back to my church, and it was good and it was bad. I remember going with my brother, and I remember so there'll be people there at church that, for example, didn't know that I had lost the baby. So they're looking, they're like, oh yeah, the baby. And you're like, then you have to explain, no, I lost the baby. And then you have to go through that whole process with kind of like each individual that doesn't know that. Yeah. And then you get people like, your friends and things that they're so sad for you. Mm-hmm. And I remember one particular friend, she like to this day, and she was very sad for me. Like, she's just a teary person anyway. She was pregnant at the time. And I think my brother overheard a conversation that was going on. And basically, I think somebody was saying to her, like, why are you feeling this way? Why are you getting emotionally involved, basically? So that kind of let me thought. I don't know who said it, and it doesn't matter. And it's best that I don't know anyway. But people had their 2 pennies worth to say about how other people should be feeling towards me, etc., etc. And again, I found out that, there's a vast range of people in church. There are people that you're close to. There are people that are in positions, etc., etc. There are people that you have an expectation. You're like, you expect that person then to come up to you and to, console you and say something and just make you feel the better. And when that expectation is not met, it's really disheartening and it's disappointing. So it was a mixed bag. It was good to be back. It was good to be in the house of the Lord and, rejoicing for, bringing me through, because there was a point where the doctors was like, we don't want to lose you. We're really worried about you. I didn't mention before, but what happened was I had preeclampsia and placenta abruption. So those 2 things together, they're very rare. And my preeclampsia was very severe. So that meant that my blood pressure was really high. And even like a year later, I struggled with high blood pressure. And I didn't have any blood pressure issues before pregnancy, never in my life. So like I said, it was a mixed feeling going back. So there were some really good points, and there were other points where you had to deal with, and there were points where you had to deal with, the people, the naysayers, basically, who's got their own kind of twist to the story, basically. Plus, you had to deal with the people that are saying, go back, man, try again, try again, try again. But also what came across, not just in church, but in all facets. Like, I'd walk out the street and I see like a student's grandparent or something, and then they'd say like, where's the baby? And then I'd explain, what you don't realize is how many people have been through the same thing as yourself, but never ever spoke about it, never publicly declared it. People were telling me, oh, I've got 3-4 babies in the cemetery. Like, what also I had an experience before was I never knew anyone my age, because at that time I was 30. I never knew anyone at my age to have lost the baby, especially at that stage. You can have kind of like an early pregnancy where you've lost early, but at this point, baby is really almost ready to go. When I look at the photo of my baby, he's just like perfect. He's got all his fingers, all his toes, beautiful, perfect, beautiful baby. And I looked at him because I got to keep him overnight in a cold cot, and just have the baby lie there with me, kind of like a bonding experience. But you look at this perfect baby and you're like, the only thing you need is breath. And that's the bit that was never going to come. But yeah, I think I've answered your question now.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Rochelle. This is really raw, and I really thank you for being so open and so forthcoming with information and sharing your experience. Jen and Alicia, we hear about the type of reception she's had, whether in church or just generally. Now, it only speaks to the fact that this thing is still there's still a taboo around the loss, to an extent, around the loss of a baby. You wouldn't dare hear it from certain parents at all until, some are, well, now we're a bit more liberal, but, it's a hush hush among certain races. You don't hear about it. You only heard, I remember only hearing that I had an aunt when I was about 18. That was never spoken of in our household, but there's still some taboo around the loss of the child, and that can kind of complicate or make it difficult for people, to know what to say or how to approach individuals who've gone through this kind of experience. Um, how do you say, is it still a taboo in your experience? Do you think it is? What do you think about that?
Yeah, from my experience, I think it's still very much a taboo, but obviously with different mediums available, and also I think even like a talk show like this, openly discussing such a topic, it opens up more for people to be open and honest about their experience. And I think it will make it more as we go along, that we'll be more open to this. But I think part of this is also people not knowing how to respond to, say, death, trauma, and things like that. So they sometimes tend to either avoid you completely because it's the best thing to do. If I avoid you, I can't say the wrong thing, I can't upset you, and that's that. Or people will know that they need to reach out and to say something, and being sort of confused about what to say, they can just end up saying the wrong thing. Yeah. Like, for example, Rochelle said, someone said to her, when are you going to go for the next one? How can you not think? If we're thinking about it now, we're thinking, how can you not know that is a really bad thing to say? Because it's almost like you don't know if Rochelle has processed the loss of her baby for her to be able to move on, but you're doing that for her. It means that you're not taking consideration of where she could be and how she might be feeling. And this is why sometimes if, say, for example, Rochelle was to say how she felt about it, then people would feel like, well, you're saying that, this is what you're saying, how it's affecting you. You don't think that's a good response. What they'll do is then avoid later on anyway. Mm-hmm. So you can see how the process is all sort of, it can be cyclical and it can go around in a circle. And this is why we end up using avoidance to actually deal with the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really common, and people often describe the fact that they're managing other people's reactions as well to their news, when actually they want to be looking after themselves. They don't want to be looking after other people in terms of reactions. And one of the easiest things to say is just, I'm so sorry, tell me about your baby. What was your baby like? Because nobody asks you what your baby is like when your baby has died, but they were there, they were real. It's really important for parents to have their babies acknowledged, because if a baby lives, we ask them, what was your birth like? What did your baby look like? And that's so important for bereaved parents to have people acknowledge their baby and ask them what their name was, and remembering their birthday, or remembering, if they've lost earlier than their due date, just remembering that due date, because that will be etched on that parent's mind. They'll know that that's coming up. And every year, the baby's birthday or special occasions, really hard as well. And just remembering their baby at those times is really special for parents.
Thank you so much. Now we're finishing off, and I just want to ask Jen, we spoke earlier before we went live, and my question again to you is, I know you answered this already privately, but how has it been during the lockdown? I know you're working from home, and in my head I thought it would be a bit slow and not so, but how has it been through this lockdown period?
It's been really busy and really challenging. I think the isolation of lockdown for bereaved parents just magnifies that isolation that bereaved parents already feel. I think there are parents who are being bereaved during COVID, so their mothers are delivering babies on their own because their partner can't be with them at the beginning. Partners aren't there for scans until very recently, although we're delighted that that's now changed this week. New guidance has come out. We've been working really hard with the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Royal College of Midwives, and the NHS, supporting the NHS and professionals to be able to provide really good bereavement care within COVID restrictions. It's hard to express empathy from behind a mask, but there are ways that people can express empathy. So we produced some guidelines, how to support parents using PPE, and how you can adapt bereavement care practice during COVID. So allowing the care for the baby that is possible with the restrictions. But our support services, we've had an increase by a third 30% every month on month during COVID. So it has been really, really busy, and we've had a lot of staff on furlough leave. So we've been working with a kind of core staff. So it's been challenging, but it's been fantastic to be able to influence the NHS and Royal Colleges by taking what bereaved parents are telling us about what's happening in hospitals and then feeding that straight back in. So having that feedback loop has been really effective, and being able to represent the parent voice is one of the really important things that SANS does. And it's been great to see how we've been able to do that despite the situation.
Yeah, thank you. And how is SANS funded, Jen?
The vast majority of our funding comes from bereaved families that we have supported, who want to raise money in memory of their baby. I know that Rochelle did a parachute jump for us. I just mentioned it before we became live. She did a parachute jump for us a few years ago, which was fantastic. And she did say she'd like to do another one. But yeah, there are lots of different ways that people want to remember their baby, and fundraising can be a really empowering way as well. Often people will throw themselves into sporting events and endurance events, and we've started a lot of online challenges obviously now because of COVID, but it's a really important part, I think, a way of people giving back. They often say they want to give back for the support of the memory box or the care they received in hospital. So
thank you so much. Thank you. And with that being said, can you just show us the memory box, Jen, and just tell us a bit about the contents that you have in there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the colour is going to be great in this light, but it's a sort of pale lilac-y colour now, and it says "Always loved, never forgotten" on the front, and it has sort of beautiful ribbons that it's tied up with. And we have a lovely group of volunteers all around the country who knit these white blankets with special edges to them that baby can be wrapped in, and parents can either leave their baby wrapped in the blanket, or often they will keep the blanket. Because smell is so important as well. So it's a comfort for parents too, that they will open the box and just look through. And these are the teddies, I think, that Rochelle was mentioning, and that one teddy stays with the baby and one it stays in the memory box with the parents. And we've also recently started producing certificates of birth, because if a baby is born, I don't know if you can see that very well, but if a baby is born and is earlier than 24 weeks and isn't classified as a stillbirth, there won't be a certificate at all. So there'll be no recognition of that baby. So it's really important for parents to have that. And this certificate, I think, is beautiful. It's not a sort of official certificate, but it looks beautiful, and people can frame it and keep it. And that's another way of remembering their baby and recognizing that their baby happened and lived. We have hand and footprint kit as well, if people want to take a hand and footprint kit of their baby, and that's one of the things we go through in our professionals training, to support professionals to be able to do that confidently and kindly, so that they can hold that space with parents and do that alongside the parents. So that's a memory that they can go back to when they want to. But we also hold remembrance events around the country as well, and people can put their sort of orders of service or some memento from those events into the memory box as well. So people are continuing that bond with their baby even years afterwards, and adding to that memory box as well. So it's people use them in different ways, but I think they're really special to a lot of people.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And tell us again, just remind us, how do parents or direct parents get in contact with SANS? Apart from being in the hospital, which is, kind of automatic.
Yeah.
How can parents get in contact with you?
I think, our website obviously has all of our information on, which is, shall I give you the website address now? So it's www.sans.org.uk. And /support if you're looking for support. But there's obviously a lot of information on the website about all sorts of things, from direct support, planning a funeral, post-mortem decisions, because that can be a really difficult decision for parents as well. They want to find out why their baby died. We have web chat on the website as well. We have a Facebook support group, which is SANS Support Facebook group, and people can just search for that on Facebook. We have a really active online community, which is www.sans.community, and that's our online sort of forum where people can swap stories and ideas and share support, and also it's moderated. So if people are having a really challenging time and maybe need a bit of extra support, we can guide them to our helpline number as well, which is 0808 164 3332. And that's a free phone number. But there are lots of different ways of getting in touch with us and getting support.
Thank you.
Please don't hesitate.
Thank you so much. And Rochelle, I'll give you, can you just say what advice or what, as your last words here tonight, what would you wish every parent or everyone would understand about the reality of being bereaved, a bereft parent? What would you tell other mothers? What would you tell or other parents about being a bereaved parent?
So first of all, I say to like other people, family members and everybody else, support network. It's BT says it's good to talk. So it's not something to be rolled on the carpet, certainly. To grieving parents and loved ones, friends, mothers especially, journal what's going on, what's going on in your thoughts. I remember writing a poem not very long after my baby had passed away, and it's just how I felt about him at the time, and it talks about how beautiful he is, how lovely, how perfect he is, and everything else. Go for long walks if you can, if the weather's nice, go for a walk, and pray. You might not find the words, but pray. Listen to if you're a believer, obviously. If not, you can listen to positive affirmations. I know that's quite in these days. Listen to positive music, things that will uplift your spirit, certainly, and cry, because even now, like hearing Jen going through the stuff, it's like it's like all coming back. It's all a bit like emotional, because I remember that like little knitted blanket, the blanket, and a little cardigan and his little hat and everything. So it's all coming back. It's like when I leave this meeting now, it's like I'm gonna go back to the box now and look. It's cry to talk about it as often as you want to, if that's part of your healing process. Certainly, like every kind of like anniversary when it's Hezekiah's birthday, I put up his picture on my status, and I care not, like, if anyone doesn't want to see it, I don't care, I'm not bothered. And that's the way how I remember him. So do what you need to do to get by. It will pass. And the more you process it, the more you do these things, it's the kind of like quicker you heal. You don't want to be having this going around like 20 years. I'm hearing people saying, my baby would have been 25 or 30. God knows I don't want to be carrying that kind of like baggage, like when I'm 60, knowing that I'm still hurting or still grieving for my baby. So process your grief and have that healthy process of grief, and so that you can get on with your life. Yes, you'll remember your baby. Yes, you'll always remember and never forgotten. On my son's grave, it says born still, but still born. So he's still remembered, even though he was a stillbirth. But do carry on with your life. Don't let this be the doom and gloom and the end all. Carry on and process your grief accordingly.
Thank you. Dr. Alicia Anderson, I think she could not have said it any better than that right there.
I agree with everything you say. Yeah, definitely. Process it and make sure you don't leave any unresolved issues that might come up later. Absolutely. You'll never forget your baby, obviously, but you need to process that to where you're accepting that, what the reality of you losing them. And, just having something just to remember them is good also.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jen Coates.
Thank you. It's been lovely to meet you all.
Much. And thanks for the information. Remember, if you want to contact SANDS, it's www.sands, that's sands.org.uk. If you need support, that's /support. And Alicia, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us again tonight. And thank
You're most welcome.
Rochelle, thank you. I'm getting a lot of comments. She's a brave lady. Thank you
God
so
is
Great.
much
good.
for being
God is
so brave and so open with your experience. You know, it's really touched me, and I do hope somebody out there don't feel alone. You know, if you're going through this kind of thing, you'll access the services that are available, and yeah, just share this video, share it, and let others know and hear about Rochelle's experience. Thanks again, Rochelle. Thanks a million. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eve.
Joining.
Thank you.
Okay, good night. Thank you so, so much. I'm gonna log off. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.